happened to our Sandy there? It fell off the wall. All right. Okay. Good morning, everybody. And let's see here. So we are going to get started with one of our daily briefings here. And of course, we've been doing these really since mid-June as needed. And I want to begin by just going over the agenda for today. We're going to talk about some updates from our Joint Information Center. And then we're going to talk about a new emergency order that the city's issuing with respect to the spike in cases and the increased spread here in Albuquerque. And so we'll talk about those specifics primarily. We do have the Fire Marshal here to speak to some of those specifics. We also have our Director of Environmental Health, who can be available as well, and our Planning Director for some of the aspects of this that we'll go into. Now, I also want to mention our game plan, at least at the city, for our administration over, let's say, the next 5 days or so. Today, we're going to focus on issues around health and safety and the different aspects of the real public health challenges that we're seeing with respect to corona. In the next few days, we are also going to be talking about our renewed efforts to help small businesses during this time, and especially restaurants. So if we're ready, we're hoping to do that perhaps Friday or even Saturday. Then I also want to mention next week we are working on what we can do to really step up for our parents and our kids if the school district is going to have a calendar that's modified. And I think at this point we know it's going to be modified. The question is, will it be delayed? Will it be 1 week on, 1 week off? Will it be 2 days a week? Or all this stuff? I want to remind everyone the city normally handles half of the students at APS, before school, after school, and over the summer. So we need to move in step with APS, and so we are reaching out to them, and we're going to be offering a wide range of options that may work in this situation. It could be anything from various facilities like the Convention Center or Isotopes Park. We're just going to have to wait and see. So we'll be working on that hopefully with APS over the next few days, and next week be able to kind of outline how the city may or may not be able to step up depending on what APS decides to do. So that's our sort of three-step initiatives for the next 5, 6, 7 days or so. So today, let's focus on the emergency order and what we're doing with respect to corona directly. Now, let me begin by mentioning a couple of updates. First, that Presbyterian's COVID-19 site at Bloom Fiesta Park is back open 7 days a week, again, as a response to the increase in spread. And it's Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m., and then on the weekends, it's 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. So same hours, actually, at Bloom Fiesta Park. And additionally, we want to remind everyone that there are other sites of testing around the city that are available. Just basically Google it, and you can see all of it, or there's numerous websites you can find these sites at. But now they're available in pretty much every area of town. Now, in light of increasing numbers of COVID-19 cases in New Mexico, the Workforce Solutions Department is also continuing to waive the work search requirements for unemployment insurance claimants. So that's very helpful to folks. For more information, check out their website. Okay, let's talk a little bit about specifically the challenges we're facing with respect to the corona pandemic right here in Albuquerque. And so for us, we know looking back, of course, we have faced some serious challenges over the past few months. And now with the virus resurging, that means our families and local businesses are once again losing their footing. And again, this is an area where we're going to try and step up and find different ways we can actually help during this tough time. We also want to acknowledge that this concept of corona fatigue is very real, and it's natural. It's a result of deep anxiety over human and economic costs that we are all witnessing. And for us, we know there's a desire to reach out for quick fixes. If we just do something for a week, then we can reopen. And I got to tell you that these are tough times, and what we're seeing nationally is that we need to prepare for the long haul. We need to prepare for restrictions and rules to change, come up and down, increase and decrease, and we need to prepare for essentially just a different way of living over the next 12 months. So we're going to talk about specifics like face coverings and things like this, but I think it's also important to remember to folks that there is no quick fix right now, and so we've got to really be prepared for the long haul. Now, in this city, our ultimate goal is saving lives and keeping the fabric of our society working. We have got to do both. We refuse to accept the concept that is an or question. We think that government needs to be able to do both. And so that speaks to the 3 items I mentioned we're going to be going over in the next 7 days. Now, so as we tackle this approach, we're trying to basically do a couple of things. We want to do smart and targeted enforcement. That's enforcement that's meaningful and that makes sense. And we also want to try and step up for those who are most vulnerable, including our small businesses and restaurants. And we'll touch on that most likely Friday or Saturday. Now, today we're focusing on the enforcement side of this dual strategy, smart and targeted enforcement that really gets to the root of the contributions to spread. That's really what we're looking at. And so for us, since really we started ramping up all of this with respect to coronavirus, we've always stood in sharp contrast actually to, I think, cities that just shut down everything. We don't want to do that. And for us, actually, I think there's a higher calling to do better than just shut down. We've got to actually find a way to conduct business, to live our lives, and stay safe. And so some of the programs we're mentioning today really speak to that. And I think we historically have shown that we can do this. We know that our spread rates and our case rates are much, much lower than all the major cities around us. And again, that's per capita. So Phoenix, Denver, Austin, we shared this slide last week. We are at least twice as good as all of those cities around us. That is a great thing. But it also means we have to continue carving our own path in Albuquerque. We got to do what works for us, and we've demonstrated that when we do that, we can be healthy and do the best that we can for everyone that lives here. Now, we also always like to remind folks that Albuquerque is unique in that in about 1,000 square miles, we are the only major metro area. So we have the majority of the hospitals. We've got the largest airport. We have the malls, the sports teams. APS is obviously the largest school district. So these are things that, make the challenges in Albuquerque also very hard. Because even if, our neighborhood's doing great, we are connected to the rest of the state. And in this case, unfortunately, to states like Arizona and Texas, where there's just much higher rates. That impacts Albuquerque. There's no doubt. You can't just magically wall everyone out. So we've got to deal with that, again, on our own terms and in the best way we can do it. So we need to do this also while recognizing that, nationally the spread right now is unchecked. And again, so I mentioned our neighboring states, but we also have to do the best that we can in the national context. And the reality is that in light of no coordinated national response, until there's a vaccine, we're going to have to continue to carve our own path and do the best that we can right here in the Duke City. So the first step we're going to do is issue a new emergency declaration here. And this declaration is always posted online and so forth. We've done a number of these, so these aren't a surprise. This is an updated one based on the most recent state order. And so as we issue this, there's a couple of things that I want to tell you that are in here that are going to help us deal with this concept of smart and targeted enforcement and hopefully reducing spread. Now, this new emergency declaration creates a mechanism under the criminal trespass law that gives us the ability to enforce state face covering requirements in full at all city properties. And there's a couple of aspects to this, so I'm going to walk through each one. I want to begin with the airport. So starting from the moment an out-of-state traveler lands at our airport, and that includes even if they are just transferring. If someone does not wear a face covering or refuses to wear one when they're provided one by our police department out there, they will be subject to immediate removal from the facility, citations and other actions. That also means if you show up at the airport and refuse to wear a mask when you go in, we're not going to let you get on the plane. Or actually, we're not even going to let you in the building. So there's a very bright line at our airport, I think for obvious reasons, because our airport is the nexus of out-of-state travel. And so this is an area where, again, smart, targeted enforcement, we think will hopefully make a difference. And again, that is going to apply inside security as well. So it's going to apply to all people in the airport and, of course, city staff. Now, we know New Mexico is a cherished vacation spot, and that's still true. And I think that actually is reflected in the fact that more people want to come here because we have done so much better as a state and as a city than a lot of places that people live. So, we've been at the top of a lot of lists for, hey, let's go to New Mexico. They got lower rates, and it's beautiful, and it's outdoors, and all of this. But that also means that we've got to do targeted smart enforcement for folks who are coming into our city. And we got to remind folks that even if you're a tourist, you got to follow the New Mexico rules and the Albuquerque rules. And so for us, that does mean some targeted enforcement in a couple of areas I'll give examples at. Any city facilities, so our botanic gardens, which we love, and our program to have metering and pods and so forth has actually worked very well. So our botanic gardens has been in many ways a role model on how to keep a large outdoor facility open, but also keep everyone safe. But we've got to make sure everyone actually does that. So this is another situation where if folks are not wearing a face mask or following the social distance rules, they'll be removed from the facility. This similarly applies to City Hall. It applies to Plaza del Sol, where all our construction permits and so forth happen over at the planning department. And I think most importantly, too, it applies to buses. So, buses have been a challenge because they are a small contained environment. We understand that. That's why we closed most of our bus routes. Recall, we kept a lot of them open because it's also essential. There is a category of folks, thousands of Burqueños, who ride the bus because they have no other means, be it shopping or work. And so they are part of critical infrastructure that we very much want to keep open, and we will. But you're required to wear a mask. And so now if you're trying to board a bus and you won't wear a mask, you won't be allowed to board. And if you're on a bus without a mask, you will be removed from the bus. Again, that's if you don't put one on. We will always offer you a mask and ask you nicely first. Now, drivers will hand out masks to folks who want. Again, they should, unless they've temporarily run out, they should have masks for folks who ask for them. And we have heard from some riders. One woman with cancer, she didn't understand why her driver couldn't get another passenger to wear a mask when she used public transportation to get to a doctor's appointment. That ambiguity ends today. That ends with this emergency order. You will get kicked off the bus if you're not wearing a mask. Now, our targeted smart enforcement extends, again, to out-of-state visitors using city facilities as well. We have heard a lot of excuses like, I didn't know I'm from out-of-state. It's fine. Here's a mask. Please wear it. But if they're going to get sort of uppity about it, we're going to kick them out of the facility. So we have also seen that we have big spikes in, out-of-state situations for folks who are coming back and forth across the border. And we just want to acknowledge some people have to work across the border. We understand that. We also know that if you live obviously near the border, which is not Albuquerque, but the challenge is people in Albuquerque, people often come to Albuquerque from our border areas. So this border question is very important to us, but obviously as a city, we're just going to make sure that we're enforcing the health order with respect to out-of-state quarantine as best that we can. So we may be asking folks with out-of-state license plates or out-of-state driver's license, how long have you been in the state and so forth. And we'll talk about how we're going to do that in just a moment. So I think the other piece of this is we, need everyone to step up as best that we can to be part of the solution. That also means prioritizing what our police department is doing. As folks know, violent crime is a major challenge in our city, and our police department is extremely stretched thin. We did amazingly meet our target to get one. We still need 200 more officers, but we're at the halfway point. We're now at 1,000 officers, but a huge chunk of them, I think about 60 of them, are still in training. So we still have tremendous constraints in the field. And so we've got to understand, well, how can we do these things around the public health order, but also try and keep violent crime hemmed in as best that we can? And our answer as a city is to broaden our enforcement capabilities. So what we are doing is we have actually cross-deputized several departments to enforce public health orders. So now we're going to be using our fire department through our fire marshal. We're going to be using our code enforcement and food inspectors through environmental health. We're going to be using the code folks from planning. We're also going to be using our parking security and our DMD security and our transit security. They're now all cross-deputized to provide notice of violation of public health orders. So this is going to allow us to hopefully free up APD be to do that tough crime fighting that we need them to do to keep us safe, but also allow us to do smart, targeted enforcement. Now, the other aspect of this is enrolling businesses, and I mentioned, especially for our small local businesses, we are going to be working with them on a number of programs to support them, probably Friday or Saturday. But in the meantime, we are really concerned about big box stores, chains. This is your Walmarts, Walgreens, these type of things. And the challenge is, historically, right, we have had to have somebody out there trying to get people to wear face masks. That also changes today. It is now the onus of the business to enforce the mask order, or we will close the business. Now, this is actually a good thing because it allows businesses to say no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. So they now have the legal authority to say that straight up, and they can blame the public health order. It's not about them, but know that if they're not enforcing that, we will just shut them down. And so we now have that ability now through several departments to be able to do that. And so just as an example, so if there's a Walgreens store and there keeps being face mask violations, either by employees or customers, and Walgreens does not enforce the mask order, we will just close that Walgreens. Okay, so for us, we also are trying to help the folks who can't afford to do that. So for our smaller businesses, we do have $1 million that City Council appropriated that we're going to be holding and issuing to small businesses so they can supply PPE. Because remember, we are just after compliance. We're not trying to punish anyone, and we're not trying to shame anyone. I think that's another challenge we've had too. This is a situation, we just want you to wear a mask. We're not going to claim that we're health experts or that we know better than anyone else. We just know it's the right thing to do right now, and we're going to do the best we can to all wear it. That's going to be our approach. But again, we'll just close the business if that approach doesn't work. All right, so for us, a few other items that I would just mention before I hand it over to our fire marshal is that there is no silver bullet. We believe, and I think all across the world and in America as well, we're seeing that face masks make a difference, face coverings. So we believe that. But we also know there is no silver bullet. We might have the best face covering compliance in the country, and we're still going to see a lot of increases in cases. That's what we have to be ready for. And that's what some of this emergency order is setting up our city to be able to do. We're just going to have a lot more flexibility. We may choose not to do a lot of the things I just mentioned, but we will have the ability to, should we need to. And that's what this most recent emergency order is all about. It's setting us up for the long term in case, unfortunately, we have to deal with this for many months going forward. So to speak more on this, I want to bring up our fire marshal, someone folks have gotten to know quite well in recent months. Fire Marshal Gene Marshall. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am Deputy Chief Gene Gallegos, Fire Marshal for City of Albuquerque. So Albuquerque Fire Rescue's Fire Marshal Office and the Public Health Order Team, which consists of APD, Environmental Health, and the Code Enforcement, are visiting many businesses on a daily basis to educate them on the Public Health Order. All right, we continue to hand out face covering flyers, such as this one, and again, educate those businesses on what is mandated by the Public Health Order upon them. This is something that we want to continue to educate the businesses and the public, each individual person on. The requirements to wear that face mask is anytime you're out in public. The only exceptions would be if you're eating, drinking, if you have a doctor's recommendation, or if you're swimming. But any other time, exercising, or out in public, you are mandated to wear that mask. So please, for all of us, just wear the mask. We are out there enforcing the COVID-safe practices in the public across the city, all city departments, well, not all, but APD, AFR, Code Enforcement, Environmental Health, and a few others, as the mayor mentioned. Our goal is, again, compliance. We do not want to, get in any kind of altercation. We're here just to educate and hope that people comply. Over the last 7 days, we've had 340 interactions with businesses or individuals. A large percentage of them have been face covering interactions, 242 to be exact, which has been about educating the public or the businesses on when and where to wear those face coverings. So that's something that we want to continue to educate these businesses on. And most of them have been businesses, so that's what we're focusing on. So the Fire Marshal's office, since the beginning of the public health order, has been educating and handing out flyers such as the public health order, a signed copy, AFRs and the city's restrictions and recommendations. We've been visiting all the large box stores, setting their occupancy loads as far as their 100%, 75, 50, 25, and 20%. Again, just the public health order changes, and we want to be able to get that information out to the public as quickly as possible, especially businesses. Again, they're the ones that are getting affected the most, so we want to be able to help them the quickest. So, face covering mandate, again, is another document that we are holding up, just like I showed you. And again, code enforcement, AFR, and environmental health are reaching out to as many businesses in person or over the phone as possible to educate them on the public health order and the possibility of a notice of violation, which we will be handing out if we need to. Again, the goal is compliance. It's to educate the public. All right. So again, altering our lives and jobs, this COVID is doing on a daily basis, and we want to do our best to keep our businesses safe and the workers safe that are helping us every single day. So please, if you have any questions, you can always call 311 or even the Fire Marshal's office at 764-6300. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marshal Gallegos. Okay, so I think as we move really into, I think, question A at this point, I do want to close by just mentioning that, as a city, that I actually, think we have been doing. There's always hundreds of calls about, like, I saw someone without a mask. But I want to just reiterate what smart targeted enforcement is. We're concerned about inside environments where people are interacting closely, like a bus, or areas where they're interacting with folks from out of state. And so that is the nexus of the face covering challenge and also where we're going to be targeting our enforcement. So for us, we also know that we got to prepare for the long haul. As I mentioned, that we as a city, we want to continue to demonstrate pandemic resilience, and that means getting through this by saving lives with the best science that's available, but also standing up for everyone in our community, from our kids to our teachers to our business owner, even to our frontline workers. And so I want to mention that we do occasionally get complaints about businesses, large, usually chains, that are not providing appropriate equipment for their workers. So we're going to be working on enforcing that. And we also understand, though, that we've got to help businesses stay open as best they can, including restaurants. So as a reminder, we are allowing all restaurants to expand to the street, to the sidewalk, to their parking lot. You got to visit the fire marshal first. So put in those requests. We've gotten dozens of requests for that. And later in the week, we're going to be announcing some additional ways in which we can try and help our restaurants throughout the city. So again, we are trying in Albuquerque to do both. We want to try and keep you open, but we also want to try and keep us all safe. And we're committed to doing both of those. But it means things are going to be complicated, and it also means that things might change as we continue to adapt to the situation. So I also want to mention that we've got to resist the temptation to, blame each other, shame each other. That's not what this is about. Albuquerque got through the first few months of this in a way that I think was really exemplary. And it's something we can continue to do this summer, and I know we can actually continue to be a role model for other cities when it comes to how we're dealing with the pandemic. Now, lastly, I just want to mention what that is. I want to remind everyone this has been one of the healthiest large cities in the country. And yes, we have to work hard. Yes, we have our challenges. But we've had, when it comes to spread rate, number of positive cases, testing availability, availability of hospital beds, and ample outdoor recreation, which we have kept open. They have made us a role model for other cities. And so that's a good thing. And one day, when we're out of this pandemic, it means people are going to be like, wow, Albuquerque is a great place to live. So let's continue to do what we have to do to make that the case. Okay, with that, we'll transition to questions from folks.
Let's go ahead and go questions first if you have any.
Okay.
Mayor, just how exactly is that going to work at the airport? Are we going to physically if we have people at every gate as an out-of-state plane comes in and like tracking people, or how's that going to work?
So at the airport, what we're going to be doing is we do have a dedicated APD unit at the airport. And so for us, this actually is it's a contained area, and we have a dedicated unit out there. So the aviation police are just going to be doing patrolling. And so they will be walking through the corridors, and we may have some additional security. We hire private security. I forget the name of the firm, but we've all seen the private security guards. And they're going to be positioned outside in the baggage claim area and so forth, asking people to wear a mask before they get in. So those are going to be our two approaches for enforcement at the airport.
And if someone doesn't want to, they'll be removed.
Yeah, so we'll always nicely ask them. We'll offer them a mask. But eventually, if they don't comply, we're not going to allow them to be in the airport.
All right, Mayor,
And that's actually, by the way, much more effective than a citation, right? Because some people are like, fine, cite me. We need them wearing a mask or out of the airport. That's why this is, I think, a smart and intelligent, targeted approach to the problem.
When it comes to travel out of state, I mean, the governor's data shows that a lot of people are traveling by car to Texas, Arizona, Colorado. I mean, is there anything on the city level that we're going to be doing to kind of make sure that traffic doesn't come to Albuquerque?
Well, that is a great question, and I forgot to repeat the questions. You know, the questions about like car travel out of state and coming back and forth. You know, it's a real tough one for a city. I mean, I would just say the state's really got to deal with that, because obviously, like, Albuquerque's in the middle of the city, so we can't really have, and there's lots of roads into Albuquerque. I mean, it's pretty much unenforceable for us to do that, except at the airport. And so we could look at some stricter measures at the airport. And we can also at least ask questions. So this is why now, under our new health order, if we see a slew of out-of-state license plates, for example, at some facility, we can at least ask them, how long have you been here? When did you get here? Have you been tested? And so forth. So we will certainly ask those questions. You know, with respect to actually hemming people in, all we can do is city employees, which they have to follow the state order.
Mayor, question from Ryan Laughlin. The New Mexico Restaurant Association says there are 1,900 restaurants in the greater Albuquerque area, and some may be forced to close if their dining rooms remain closed. Temporary patio has helped some, but do you support the governor's new order closing dining rooms? And is there any other government assistance the city is looking at for restaurants?
So we're going to have a lot more on how we can help restaurants probably Friday or Saturday. We're working on a package of initiatives to do that. And from our standpoint, we just want to try and help you stay open. So we'll see what we're able to do. And I think more, again, than almost any city that we've come across, I'm sure there's exceptions, by this weekend, we're going to have the most restaurant-friendly environment underneath the state public health order.
A question from Chris McKee about cross-deputizing of various departments. To be clear, does this mean that city security guards, code enforcement, the fire marshal's office can actually write citations against people who aren't wearing masks or are violating the health order in other means?
So what this means is they can write violation notices just as you would other different types of citations. There's a number of sort of vocabulary words here, but it does not mean they cannot issue the $100 fine. That can only be done by law enforcement officers.
And can people, this is also from Chris McKee at KRQE, can people expect if they're walking on a sidewalk to get a reminder from a police officer or another city worker about the mask requirements? Or is this mainly targeted at specific quote-unquote hot spots or places where more people are?
So these are good questions, and I want to correct the last one. So what it's not actually, we can do fines. What we cannot do is a criminal misdemeanor citation. That you can't cross-deputize that. So I want to be clear that our cross-deputized folks are permitted to do different kind of cost measures should it be deemed necessary, and we'd work through that. Also notices, but they cannot do a misdemeanor citation. So you'll have to repeat the other question.
Absolutely. If people are walking down the street or on the sidewalk, will they get a reminder from a police officer or another city worker about the mask requirements, or is this specifically targeted at a hotspot area?
So this is all really designed to be smart, targeted enforcement to reduce spread. And so if someone is walking down the street, without a mask, I'm sure if any of these folks have time, they might nicely remind them. But again, that's not the nexus of inside, close proximity, folks from out of state. That's what we're targeting.
Follow-up from Chris McKee on masks. They become, for some people, a sensitive subject. Are you at all concerned about seeing more situations where mask enforcement escalates to potentially dangerous situations?
Questions about enforcement and escalation, I'm always concerned about that. And in fact, let's not forget for the last month, the community was asking, for example, our police department to de-escalate and be less involved with all of these kinds of interactions. It's also why we are committed to creating a community safety department for all of those reasons. So I'm very concerned about that. And that's also why we've created this alternative method of enforcement that is individuals without weapons and who are not police officers who can work on mask enforcement and make sure things don't de-escalate. I think it's also a way to free up our officers to fight crime. That's what we need them doing. And so for us, we think, again, this is about Albuquerque carving its own path. I believe we're the only city to be doing this. And I think it's going to prove both helpful on enforcement, but also helpful on preventing escalation.
I have a question here from Jessica Dyer at the Albuquerque Journal. How many warnings will the city give a business not enforcing face mask requirements before shutting them down?
So the question is about, how many warnings before we shut them down? We'll have to see. And we saw this before when, we had a challenge, frankly, with smoke shops and massage parlors. And so we did end up issuing some citations there. And I believe there was one that literally we basically were like, we're shutting you down tomorrow. And then they finally came into compliance. So we'll do the same thing. We always start nice. We're after compliance. But if someone is just going to flaunt the law, then we're going to enforce the law. So that'll be done on a case-by-case basis.
A follow-up question from Jessica Dyer. How many more public health order enforcers do you have now in the city through this cross-deputization method? How many more people have you added to this?
So I'm going to ballpark 100. I'm looking over for folks at our Marshal and our Director of Environmental Health. It might not be that high, but don't forget DMD. We'll say about 75, yeah, because DMD secure transit security in facilities. Yeah.
And that's all I have in the Zoom chat. If you just want to pause for 1 second to make sure I've gotten everyone's questions. I think we're good.
And one more question.
Oh, Marissa?
Yeah, just Mayor, how are we going to just enforce this? I feel like we always start with the warnings, and then, like you said, some people are like, just give me the citation. I don't care. Like, this is my infringement on my rights. I mean, how are we really going to enforce this and take that to the next level?
Well, this is, I think, a really good example where, again, we want to keep people safe, and that is not always the same as enforcement. So in the example that you gave, if somebody's like, well, you can just fine me forever, we can do that, right? But it doesn't actually keep everyone around them safer. That's why now we will just remove them from the premises. So again, if it's like an inside facility, like a bus that's high risk, we will just remove them from the bus. Now, we're not going to do that. It's not practical or rational to do that at something like a park, or something like that, because people are outside and they're spread out and so forth. So again, we're trying to keep people healthy above ticky-tack enforcement. We're just not going to do that. And I think that is the point of all these orders.
And at a restaurant, I mean, if someone's being, just obnoxious and doesn't want to leave, I mean, would we physically go in there and remove them?
If we thought it was a public health issue, so if there were a lot of close people that were proximate, if it wasn't like a takeout situation where, they're not supposed to be in a restaurant anyway. So that's certainly a situation where if someone is going to create a nuisance, public nuisance is already a violation anyway. And so that's something we would take seriously. But I want to say this, actually, by and large, none of this has happened in Albuquerque. So there's always going to be a couple of examples. But I think it also helps to move away from the sort of shaming people. And, if everyone just moves on and goes about their business, then we can work through this. And so, again, we're after as much compliance as we can. We're not here to punish anyone. All right, well, we'll see you later in the week to talk about our families, alternatives for families to keep them safe, but also be outside and have fun, and also how we're going to help our restaurants. Thanks so much.